Welcome, everyone. I am Bob Wurzelbacher, the director of the Respect Life Office for the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, and this is our video podcast series that we call Being Pro-Life. Each month, we discuss a different topic in the Respect Life arena. We'll hear a personal story from someone deeply affected by that issue, and finally, we'll share ways that you can get involved. This month's topic is the beautiful gift of adoption, and as always, we have special guests. Will you please introduce yourselves?
We are Caitlyn and Mike Bennett, and we are adoptive parents of a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old.
All right, so Mike and Caitlyn, let's just start by asking you a little bit about your story. Why did you decide to adopt?
Caitlyn and I, we met in college and dated for a few years at the end of college and postgraduate, and we're married in 2010. We're both from Cincinnati. We're in Dayton now, though. And it was maybe 5 years into our marriage that we started trying to have children. That was a challenging process for us to have children, to get pregnant. And so we tried that for a little bit and sought some medical assistance with that. And nothing was really coming to fruition, I guess. With that, the conversation quickly evolved into, we feel called to be parents, but clearly this isn't working from a biological standpoint. And so should we look into the process of adoption? That was something that we had talked about when we were dating, that, at some point in our relationship, would we be open to adopting children? And I remember that, we both had an openness to that, but we didn't really have like a timeline for it or anything.
If I can interrupt for a second, did either one of you have positive experiences of adoption in your, growing up, cousins, siblings, yourselves, anything like that? That it seems a little bit different to me that you would have while you were dating that conversation.
I mean, we didn't have any indication before we got married. It was difficult for us to get pregnant. So it wasn't like, we might not be able to, therefore this is an openness that we have. I mean, I knew people, not anyone very close to me who was, I knew people who were adopted, and that seemed beautiful and wonderful, but it was never something that I didn't have a sibling. I guess you didn't either.
I've never thought about it, but I don't think, to my knowledge, I didn't know anyone who was adopted. I do recall, so I work in ministry, and there was a point early on that I led a breakout trip to Belize for our university, and it was possible to adopt children from the orphanage that we were working at. And the week that I was there was a couple that was adopting one of the children. It had been a very long process, and I think their adoption had just been finalized. So we helped celebrate that with them. That might have been happening right at the same time that we were trying to get pregnant. And so that may have implicitly influenced me. I didn't really think about it much until this point. International adoption wasn't really something that we had looked into very much at any point for us. That would be the extent of my explicit exposure to adoption, I think. Part of the reason why we told that story about us dating and having the conversation about adoption was really that for us, adoption was a path to parenthood that became our primary path to parenthood, and we were very aware of that and intentional about that we didn't come at adoption with the thought of we're going to save a child from their circumstances or that sort of thing. That we felt we could be good parents. We'd never done it, but it was really about us responding to a call that we felt to expand our family and love another child, 2 children now, maybe more children through that avenue.
Yeah. I remember a woman in a store was like, "Oh, your baby's so cute." I don't know. Somehow it came up that she was adopted, and she's like, "Oh, you're saving the world." And I was like, well, she kind of saved us in a way.
Yeah.
I think one thing that was really influential for us and a big part of our adoption story is that our best friends also have 2 adopted children. They also had trouble conceiving, and so they had started the process a little bit before us. And kind of through their journey, I think for me especially, that opened me even more up to the possibility, and kind of feeling like that was our path to becoming parents was through adoption. So that was definitely really influential for us as well.
So you were having difficulty getting pregnant. You decided to explore adoption. How much did you know about it, and what did you do to open that process?
We didn't know very much about it. Even the different types of adoptions. I mean, I knew that like international adoption existed and domestic adoption existed, but even kind of looking through what those processes are like, because they're so different, and even going through a private agency as opposed to going the foster care route, foster to adopt. There's so many different ways that you can do it. And so through our research and through our friends' experience, because they had kind of just gone through it, that was what pushed us to our agency. And then we kind of started the process from there. Our agency did a lot of just education on the process and what that was like and what can you expect each step of the way. And then obviously there were classes that we had to take in order to be licensed to adopt.
So you went with an agency in domestic adoption, right? Well, how does that process work? What did you have to do?
There's things like fingerprinting, background checks. You have to have your home inspected. You have to have a fire inspection. That's the home study process. Is if they were to place a baby in your home, is it safe? Are you safe? Is there anything that would give reason for us not to place a baby with you? So we met our social worker. She came to our house. We did a very long interview. I think looking at, why do we want to adopt? Are we prepared to become parents? So it's a very deep dive into your life. Anyone who's ready to enter into this process, just know that it can feel like a lot. We really tried to get things done quickly, stay organized and check all those boxes. And then once all of that material is put together, then your agency will basically finish your home study. It'll be an open home study and you can be placed for adoption. We also had to, I mentioned, take classes in various topics, especially with children who may have had some sort of trauma, that we would be a little more aware and able to serve them. So
you were open to adopting up to what age then?
We were 0 to 2, but that's something all adoptive parents have to do if you're going through that process. And then once our home study was completed, we put together our profile. So there was an online profile and then a one-page profile and then like a brochure that told our future child's birth parents about us and just kind of gave an overview of who we are and our hopes for being parents and for our children.
So profile, you pretty much explained that, but it's pictures, it's things that you write about yourself so that birth parents, birth moms who are looking to place can look through several and have an idea of who it is that they think they would like to place their child with. That's the purpose of the profile, right?
Yeah, and one part of the home study process is to fill out a sheet. So our agency used a sheet that's from the state that basically has like a whole long list of things that you might be open to. I think it's really meant for like couples who are going through foster care, but that's part of the home study process. So we were able to say, yes, 0 to 2 years old, but also these are the other characteristics of a child that we feel like we would be able to support. And so that also helps our agency know when they would show our profile.
Just so people know what you're talking about, these are everything from certain types of illnesses that you would be open to adopting, right? Whether it's learning disorders or physical handicaps. It even includes racial profiles. If a Caucasian couple is going to raise a Black child, you need to be aware of that and aware of how it is that respects their ethnicity. And you just need to be aware of all of these things and decide what it is you're open to and not open to. Sometimes it seems a little bit jarring, not even a little bit. When you have a baby, you don't choose these things, right? But you can say yes to everything, but
when we were filling it out, I remember saying to Mike, I feel like I'm playing God here. Like,
right.
When you get pregnant, you don't get to choose whether or not your kid has cerebral palsy or any sort of ailment. So it seems in some ways unfair that we are like checking boxes of, this is the baby that we want. But, we also would get emails from our agency if there was a special situation. And so those were where maybe there was a baby born with a certain ailment or there was a special circumstance with the birth parents that we would need to be aware of. And so basically we would email back and say whether or not we wanted to be considered for the situation. And those are really good moments for us too, within our marriage, to be honest and to really be open to wherever our baby is. We know that our child is meant to be with us. And so we're kind of letting the Spirit move and guide us to where that child is. Some good conversations, but also some trust in all of that as well, of saying, okay, I think we can do this. And, what are the resources we need to figure out, or people we need to talk to, and that kind of thing.
The thing we had to remember throughout that whole portion of the process was, what do we feel like we can take on and nurture and endure and support, like from a sense of our family? That was a helpful mindset for us, to feel like we weren't trying to pick the quote unquote perfect child or something like that, but just know like what might be feasible for us. And also in hindsight, once each of our kids was born, we had like a monthly follow-up with our social worker in our house. And I remember after our 3-year-old, our daughter, was born, our social worker was talking to us about like, well, enduring that process of her birth is a form of trauma. And that's not to say it's bad. It's just, that's a nature of the experience. And so trying to have that mindset of what's going to be most feasible for us to support and to take on from a family dynamic, but also like what's going to be necessary for us to be healthy in that process, and do that to the best of our ability and the ways that God might be calling us.
Right. Let's get back to the story. So you filled out that process and then you wait.
We actually had a match. It was like our profile was barely done. It was a failed match. And the birth mom decided that she wasn't going to go through with placing her baby for adoption, which was difficult at the time. And it was it was a stressful process up and down, and of her trying to figure that out. We know now that child wasn't our child, and, that we hope and pray for the best for her and for her baby. So
right. Can you want to tell a little bit more about that? How far along in the process before it was a roller coaster the whole time? You knew she was kind of on the fence the whole time?
I think part of the challenge for us was she had preeclampsia. And so there was a very good chance that the baby would be premature. So, we said yes, knowing that there was a chance that the baby could come early, and, looking into what are the things that we need to know. Also, that's a benefit for us to be able to know that going into it, so that, we can do our research and figure out what are the things that we may need to be aware of as this child grows up, if they're a preemie and all of that. I think looking back, there might've been things that were clearer to me now about like her kind of trepidation of not being sure. But when you as an adoptive parent are so hopeful, right? Like you're so excited that you don't always see that full picture yet. But also that hope that we were a stop on her journey to parenting, and that no matter where that led her, because we didn't have contact with her after she had decided to leave the agency and not place the baby for adoption, hopefully that is the case for her.
I think we felt a sense of relief afterwards. We could sense some of that trepidation from the birth mother, like in our gut, we could kind of feel it. But because of the excitement and hope, I think we were trying to maybe move past that or ignore it a little bit. And so when the birth mother did decide to parent, we actually felt a sense of relief of like, okay, that makes sense now. And so, that was at least a learning experience for us, to pay attention to all those different dynamics and feelings. And that match process and the time leading up until birth is really a time of discernment. I mean, there are some commitment points involved, but to pay attention in those same ways that you would pay attention to a discernment process is important.
So you went back to waiting, went back on the list, you could say.
Back in the process.
And then how long before?
Yeah, so it was 2.5 months, which we are very, very,
that
very.
is not usual. Yeah.
Yes. We're very lucky.
You're very photogenic. You wrote a great profile.
It was right before Thanksgiving, and we got an email that a birth mother wanted to meet with us. And so we scheduled that. It was the Monday after Thanksgiving that we met with our kid's birth mother. And that was what's considered the match meeting. It was funny because we were like, are we one of a couple couples, like, or 2 or 3 couples that she's meeting with, or is it just us? And so her social worker was the one who reached out to us. That's also part of the process, that the adoptive family has a social worker and the birth mother or birth parents have a social worker that they're working with kind of as their, point of contact, advocate, all of that. And so her social workers told us that we were the only family that she was going to meet with at this point. So we went to a hibachi restaurant, which was so funny.
Which was the birth mother's choice. That was what she wanted to do.
Yeah, she wanted to eat. We were like, whatever you want to eat, we'll feed. And it was just clear that there was a connection. She really felt that through our profile and through meeting us, that there were things that she really appreciated about who we were, and that she wanted us to be the parents for her child. So that was our daughter, who's 3 now. And then she was born, it was like a 5-week match. So she was born early January. So it was only 5 weeks that we were matched, it was funny going to our bosses and being like, hey, so this is happening. And to them, it felt like no time at all, especially to people who are like, pregnancy is 9 months. Like, you have all this time to prepare for your first child. But that 5 weeks felt long at points too, just being excited and anxious about the process.
And I think the match meeting, it was this kind of delicate dance of, we wanted to put our best foot forward and be authentic. We wanted her to see who we were, but we also wanted her to think highly of us. And then there was also an opportunity to learn a little bit about her. Like, we were intentional about asking her questions about her upbringing and like her familial relationships, or like people who helped raise her, like those types of dynamics that she might want to see come to fruition or be different for her biological child. Yeah. So, and then I do agree that the job portion was a little bit strange. Navigating that dynamic of things is different for everybody, and it can be really challenging given how different this is than a biological process. Because I remember when we were finishing the home study process and we were ready to be on the waiting list to be matched, I remember going to my boss and like letting her know, like, okay, we're in this process, so I'll communicate with you the best I can, but just so you know, this can either happen really fast or it can be really drawn out.
So by the end of that meeting at the restaurant, was anything said at that point, or was just kind of like a wait and see?
I think the conversation was the social worker and birth mom would talk, and then they would like get back to us. And so it was like a text on the way home, that because it was about a 40-minute drive from where we are. And it was on text on the way home that the social worker said, she would love to be officially matched with you guys. And we got her phone number. And so then the communication started that night.
So 5 weeks later. So that was a little bit about that, right? That was probably fun, exciting. I guess it was probably a phone call.
So we went to the hospital with her. That was really special. She really wanted it to be as close to, she kept being like, I wanted to be as close to like you guys having the baby as possible. So she wanted us at doctor's appointments, and she wanted us in the room when our daughter was born. That's not a lot of adoptive parents' experiences. Yeah. And so we feel really, really, really blessed that she really wanted us on this journey through the whole way. So it always makes me feel emotional to think about and talk about that, because that was so special for us.
Right. And
I think that that's really important for anyone who's looking into adoption. This process, obviously we're talking about our experience, but it really is her experience. It is ultimately her choice from conception up to when papers are signed. This is her journey and her decision that we are on this, and that we are the option, right? We are the option if she decides not to parent. And so it was always important to us that her wishes were first, and, it was not about us and how we expected our adoption to go. It was about her and what she needed in order to make the best decision for her and for the kids. So,
and that was one dynamic that was important for us when we were looking at agencies, was the way that different agencies would support birth mothers, even postpartum. Mm-hmm. So
now you have 2 children. Tell us a little bit about the process with the second one. How long before you decided, okay, we want to do this again?
Yeah.
Right. I guess you went with the same agency.
We did decide to do the same agency. We actually, so the home study is usually good for about 2 years, at least in Ohio. And so we had renewed our home study and we were ready to kind of go back into the waiting process. Caitlyn and I had talked about like, what's the best way to do this? Because both of our adoptions are open. And so we maintain communication with the birth mother in that way. How do we kind of do justice to telling her we're going to go back into the waiting process? Like our daughter might have a sibling someday. And so from that conversation, we thought it was good to at least just give her a heads up.
We also knew she was pregnant. Yeah, we knew that she was expecting again. And in my conversations with her, we joked about it later because we kind of always danced around it. Like, are you thinking about adoption again? Or do you want a parent?
We didn't want to have this be like we were trying to manipulate her, twist her arm or anything. We were really asking those questions just so we would be aware of like, there's going to be a question we need to like think about at some point. When we were ready to go back into the waiting process, we were thinking like, how do we just let her know, but also not have her assume that we're hoping she'll ask us, that sort of thing. So anyway, long story short there, Caitlyn did reach out to her and sent her a message and said, that we're going to go back into the waiting process.
And she called me right away. She was like, well, we're doing this again.
Yeah. I was upstairs in our house and I could tell from the tone of Caitlyn's conversation, like, oh, this is happening a lot faster than I thought it was going to happen. I was okay with that.
So again, we are very, very, very fortunate in that we really did not have to wait very long with either of our kids. And just the beauty of them as biological half siblings for us, that they get to be together, and the story for them as adoptees of love that their birth mother has is the same for both of them, and is the same for all adoptees. I'm really grateful that, when we talk about, we're having a lot of talk about babies and bellies, and because our friends, a lot of our friends are having kids and what babies are in whose bellies, and just the conversation of, well, whose belly were you in? Like you weren't in mommy's belly, and how just as a 3-year-old processing that, she really doesn't understand any of it. But it's a conversation in our house that I think is important. We don't do visits with their birth mom, but just that they know who she is. They know that her decision was a decision of love.
You don't do visits, but it's open because meaning who the birth mom is. What, you send pictures to her, things like that?
Yeah. So communication, messages, mostly through phones.
We kind of follow her lead on that. So it's, we're open to visits. It's just never come to fruition. I think we did pictures for like monthly pictures for the first year for each of them. We've never lined up a visit, and we kind of follow her lead on what she's open to with that. But at least our 3-year-old and soon our 1.5-year-old, once he can start to comprehend things, like it is a normal piece of conversation. And at most of our family dinners, we do like a prayer before meals, and we offer prayer intentions when we do that. And we always pray for their biological mother by name. So they're used to hearing that and know her name and that sort of thing as well.
Your second one is 1.5. So It sounds like your oldest was about 1.5 or pushing 2.
He was 19 months when he was born.
So are we thinking about 3? Where are we in that process?
We do renew our home.
The same.
We are renewing our home study, but we're not in a waiting process yet.
They came pretty fast, the two of them.
Right.
So,
yeah, 18 months apart. Right.
I think it's important, if you are thinking about adopting, that it's not a stress-free process. Our social worker called it a different kind of labor. We were the first people to hold our daughter in our arms, but we didn't know until, papers were signed. And that's the first step. The birth parents will sign away parenting rights. So then the child is in the custody of the agency. And then in Ohio, it's 72 hours from birth to signing. And then 6 months after placement is the finalization. So then we went to court and finalized both of their adoptions.
Right. So do you know anything about the birth father here?
I know that one of them knows of us. The other, I don't know.
So if down the road they want to meet their biological parents, sounds like the biological mother would be very easy. Mm-hmm. It may be difficult in the biological father. side. I'm sure that's not unusual.
And that's something that I think about a lot as far as when our kids have questions, or if there's, health questions and things like that. And, their birth mother would be my resource, and that's it. So
one key component for us, like throughout this journey, was thinking about how do we honor this part of their identity and the fact that they are adopted, and, what we do know about their biological parents and what we don't. And so for us, it was important to be honest with them and talk with them about that from the start. And so, we have a few kids' books about kids who are adopted and talking about that. And so we just try to normalize some of that.
Also, their best friends are adopted. So
yeah,
it's very confusing when we talk about everyone who's adopted, because they have so many people in their lives who are adopted.
Yeah. But the reality is like they look different. And so, thinking about some of those dynamics and physical characteristics and those sorts of things that make it obvious. So it's just important for us.
So real quick, I guess, for anybody considering, right, adoption, and you mentioned that your children don't look like you. So it sounds like they might be biracial or something like that. You want to talk a little bit about the difficulties or challenges, or even if you would use those words? Some people might say, "Oh, it makes no difference." Well, I mean, but it does. You do need to be aware of the racial history of a child, and you have to deal with the fact that they look in the mirror, and you're walking in the grocery store, and people can tell that you're not biological parents. So, what did you want to say anything about that?
It doesn't change anything from like the standpoint of us loving them.
Of course,
so
absolutely.
That dynamic is the same. Our son is, for clarity, is biracial. His biological father was Black. I'm cognizant of it most when we're together as a family, and it's clear that, both Caitlyn and I look different than him. When I'm out by myself with him, it's like there's a little bit more ambiguity that I think people can have. But again, I think it just goes back to that dynamic of honoring his identity and who he is. So I think we both have made good strides, and will continue to educate ourselves about ways that the experience of people of color in our world, the impact of white privilege, the ways that white privilege has been part of our experience growing up, and ways that we need to kind of change our behavior because of that. Just ways to be more inclusive, because that's, in my opinion, that's who we're called to be as Christians, but also for us as parents of a child of color. And so it struck me most one time we were at Mass, our friends, their children are also children of color, both of them. And so of our 4 kids, Delia is the only one who is clearly white. And it hit me that even that dynamic of, how that impacts their relationships or could play out into the future. And so just being cognizant of it, but also trying to be proactive in how we talk about race.
As white people, as white parents, that, our experience growing up it was different, and that for our son, we have to look at his growing up in the lens of him being Black. And so that might mean different conversations. And some of that is really hard because we love him so much. It's, but also celebrating the fact that he's Black, celebrating books that we have or people that we know, and having it not just be about like the Black struggle, but also, there's a lot of gift in his history. So I think that's an important aspect of being a transracial adoptive family as well.
I was just going to ask before we close, if you want to say anything about your kids, tell us what they're like, about their personalities to the extent that they come out at 3 and 1.
Oh man.
They're both big personalities.
Yeah. 3 is a big personality stage. They're a lot of fun. Our daughter is very, opinionated, as a lot of 3-year-olds are. She's very empathetic. I think that is one of the things, and I've told their birth mom this, that I see a lot of like her care for other people echoed. So is the same for their birth mom. Like I just see some of her personality. It's just funny, nature versus nurture. I think about that a lot, having adopted kids. And I really do believe that there's a lot of their birth mom in them, especially in Delia and her empathy. And she's always she always has a lot of questions about how people are feeling and, why this person in this book is sad. And she loves wearing dresses. So that's her.
Yeah, they both have a really good sense of humor. And like Delia loves this stage. She's really loving like pretending. And playing games and that sort of thing. Finn is currently obsessed with birds and planes, like to the point where if we're in our backyard, he will like jump up and down when he sees a plane because he just loves it. Or we're in our house and he hears it and he's trying to like look out the window, but we have like awnings over our porches so we can't see and that type of thing. It's really fun to like see them experience the world. And it's also another way of growing for us as individuals, of watching them learn and experience the world and thinking about how we did that one day.
It's God's grace is seeing them do all those things. Like, you know, grace is, we don't deserve it and we don't ask for it. And we definitely feel just so lucky to have them throughout infertility and all those challenges that if I had known what I know now, you know, if I could say to myself back then, like, it will be okay. You know, you will become a mom. You guys will become parents, to know how good it all is. So we're very blessed. We are so blessed to have met our kid's birth mom and have her choose as parents.
If anybody listening here wants to get a hold of Mike and Caitlyn, if you have more questions, you want to talk to someone who's been adopted, contact us at respectlife@catholicaoc.org, and we can put you in touch with Mike and Caitlyn. Thanks for sharing with us your story of your journey as someone who adopted 2 children. I'm sure hearing your story can help a lot of people see more fully about how beautiful adoption can be. So thank you for spending time with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
And I want to thank all of our viewers and listeners for tuning in on this episode of our Being Pro-Life series. Head to the website to check out the video version or the links talked about in this episode at www.catholicaoc.org/beingprolife. Thanks again for listening. I look forward to being with you next time.